July the 10th, 1940. 18,000 feet above the English Channel. The sun is brutal. The sky, clear. And in the cockpit of a Hurricane fighter, slicing through the air at 280 miles per hour, Pilot Officer Alan Deere wipes sweat from his forehead with the back of his glove. The roar of the Rolls-Royce Merlin engine drowns out everything except the voice coming through his headset. Bandits. Vector 215. Angels 1-8. Buster. It's terse, controlled. Just like they trained. But what grabs Deere's attention isn't the tone. It's the accuracy. He hasn't seen anything yet. No black specks on the horizon. No glints of sun off canopies. But that voice, calm and exact, tells him where the enemy is. And it's never been wrong before. He tightens his grip on the control column, nods once, and banks left. 30 miles ahead, across the sky and still over the sea, a formation of Heinkel. He-111 bombers cruises forward, unaware they've already been spotted. Their engines hum steady. A ring of Bf-109 fighters paces beside them, sharp and ready. They think they're coming in clean. They're not. In a windowless operations room 60 miles away, beneath the surface of RAF Uxbridge, women trace the bomber's path on a map with grease pencils. A red telephone blinks. A controller calls out. 12 plus, coming in fast, estimate 5 minutes to coast. No one looks up. They don't have to. Everything's moving as it should, because along the British coast, from Ventnor to Bawdsey, a silent network has been watching. Massive steel towers, some nearly 350 feet tall, rise from fields and cliff tops like skeletons. Each has wires stretching between arms, dishes, and dipoles, aimed at nothing in particular. To civilians, they're odd but harmless. To the German High Command, they're completely unimportant. Hitler had seen them in photographs. Luftwaffe pilots reported strange transmissions, but Berlin wasn't impressed. Göring laughed when British radar was mentioned. His message was clear. Even if they can see us coming, they can't stop us. He would be wrong, dangerously wrong. The British called the system Chain Home. It was the first fully operational radar defense network in the world. It didn't just detect planes, it told you where they were, how fast they were moving, and at what altitude. Not minutes after they crossed the coast, but while they were still over France. That morning, as Alan Deere climbs into the sun, he doesn't know all the science behind it. He doesn't care. What he knows is this: they're never guessing. Fighter Command always knows where to send them. The same radar that tracked the Luftwaffe across the channel is now guiding Deere and his squadron right into their path. Below, on the white cliffs of the Kent coast, spotters scan the sky. But it's the radar operators who've already done the real work. At the receiver station in Dover, an operator stares at a green oscilloscope screen, watching a faint spike move left to right. "Echo confirmed," she says, voice steady. It's not glamorous, it's not loud, but it's changing everything. In Germany, Luftwaffe commanders still think the RAF is scrambling planes blindly, wasting fuel, reacting too late. Göring, certain of air superiority, promises Britain will fall within weeks. But back in the sky, Deere's flight closes in. The intercept is perfect. A flicker, then tracers. Guns rip open the sky. A Heinkel shudders under the burst of 303 rounds. One engine coughs smoke. A Bf-109 dives in. And suddenly it's chaos, turning, climbing, firing. The dance of war over England has begun. And all of it, every maneuver, every moment, started with an invisible wave, bouncing from a tower the enemy never bothered to destroy. This is how the Battle of Britain really begins. Not with bombs, not with speeches, but with radar towers no one believed in except the people who built them. It was July 11th, 1940. At RAF Bentley Priory, the war for Britain's skies was about to begin. In a high-ceilinged room filled with cigarette smoke, ticking clocks, and the quiet hum of urgency, Air Chief Marshal Hugh Dowding leans over the plotting table. Women from the Women's Auxiliary Air Force, WAAFs, move colored markers across a giant map of southern England. Each marker represents an incoming raid. Some show fighter squadrons already scrambled. Others track suspected bomber formations still far off over the French coast. Everything is precise. Everything depends on one thing: radar. Doubting doesn't speak much. He doesn't have to. He trusts the system. It's his system. For 5 years, he pushed to connect every piece: radar towers, ground observers, sector stations, radio links, control rooms into a single chain. It wasn't flashy, and it didn't win headlines. But now, it's holding the country together. He turns to the controller beside him. "No. 11 Group? Ready, sir. Biggin Hill and Tangmere squadrons are airborne, intercepting over the Thames estuary." Doubting nods. A decision made. A silent one. Back to the map. What's happening here is unlike anything in the world. While the Luftwaffe sends massive raids across the Channel, hoping to overwhelm defenses, the British are choosing exactly when and where to strike. No more endless patrols burning fuel for nothing. No more guesswork. The moment a raid appears on the radar screen, it's tracked. Sector by sector. Filtered, confirmed, relayed to command, then down to individual fighter airfields. And within minutes, Spitfires and Hurricanes are climbing to meet them. This isn't just defense, it's control. The system works because of Chainhome, those awkward-looking towers stretching along the southern coast. Most are manned day and night by teams of Royal Air Force technicians and scientists, many of them under 25. They're not pilots. Most don't even wear uniforms, but they're watching, always. Each radar station transmits a beam, then waits for it to bounce back, a dot on a screen, a blip that could mean 50 aircraft or 5. Trained operators measure the echo's distance and strength, estimate altitude, then send it to Fighter Command in real time. The Germans have nothing like it. They rely on visual reports, radio chatter, and timing. But over the Channel, weather shifts fast. Clouds hide formations. Pilots make errors. British radar doesn't care. It sees through clouds, through night. It doesn't blink. At 10:42 a.m., an enemy raid appears on the screen at RAF Rye. 40-plus aircraft, high altitude, crossing from Calais. The call goes out. Observer Corps confirms it: black dots emerging from the haze. Within 2 minutes, 2 Spitfire squadrons are ordered airborne from Kenley. At 11:01, they break through the low clouds and spot the enemy. He-111 bombers flanked by Bf-110 escorts. A perfect intercept. On the ground, a dozen WAF operators trace the engagement second by second. Voice reports stream in. Enemy, breaking formation. Bandits at Angels, 15. Splash 1. Every confirmed kill is logged. Every retreat noted. Doubting watches. Quiet, measured, always watching. The Germans still don't understand what's happening. Their bombers are getting intercepted farther and farther from their targets. The RAF fighters show up just minutes before the attack. Not too early. Not too late. Always in just the right place. It doesn't feel like luck. It's too consistent. Still, Göring is unconvinced. He believes Britain is on its last breath. He insists their defenses are cracking. He's told his pilots that the enemy's airfields are almost gone, that their fighters are running low, that morale is collapsing. But every day, the RAF shows up again. Accurate, aggressive, and somehow always waiting. On July 14th, another large raid is launched, this time toward Southampton. Chainhome stations at Pevensey and Ventnor detect them before they've even passed halfway across the Channel. Doubting's team responds in minutes. The Hurricanes are there before the bombs drop. 8 bombers downed. The rest turn back. But today, history was watching. Reichsmarschall Hermann Göring stands at a polished oak table surrounded by maps, photos, and Luftwaffe brass. A cigar smolders in a crystal ashtray. He points toward the British coast. Their defenses are weak. We strike now, hard and fast. 1 week and they'll beg for peace. Several generals nod. Others remain silent. No one in the room mentions radar. No one dares question Göring's confidence. He promises Hitler that the Luftwaffe will destroy the Royal Air Force, in the air and on the ground. The plan is bold. launch hundreds of bombers with heavy fighter escort, flatten airfields, knock out hangars, cripple radar if possible, but only as a secondary target. The towers don't seem dangerous. After all, if the RAF is destroyed, radar won't matter. At first, the plan looks sound on paper. Luftwaffe 2 and Luftwaffe 3 begin heavy strikes along the southern coast. Dover, Portland, Southampton. Waves of Heinkels, Dorniers, and Junkers bomb key infrastructure. The fighters fly cover, expecting light resistance. Instead, RAF fighters appear in force again and again. From Tangmere, from Biggin Hill, from Middle Wallop. Sometimes 10 minutes before the bombers arrive, sometimes seconds, but always in the right place, and always too many. Göring demands answers. Luftwaffe reconnaissance pilots report strange steel towers near every coastal command station. Radio signals are detected, strong ones. Some junior officers raise concerns. Could this be part of a detection system? The Luftwaffe command shrugs it off. We've seen no proof it works. If they had radar, we'd know. It's a bluff. And so, the Germans continue hitting airfields. Hangars are cratered, runways pocked, but the damage rarely lasts more than 24 hours. The RAF patches holes overnight, rebuilds, rearms, and climbs back into the sky each morning. Meanwhile, the radar towers, those non-threats, keep working. Even when the Luftwaffe bombs near them, the structures prove harder to destroy than expected. They're spaced out, reinforced, and the crews know how to operate through interference. On July 18th, a concentrated strike is ordered on the radar station at Ventnor on the Isle of Wight. Bombers hit the area, damaging the transmission site. The radar goes down, but only temporarily. Backup systems kick in. Within 24 hours, partial detection is restored. Within 48 hours, the entire station is operational again. Göring's strategy ignores this. He doubles down. More raids, more airfields. Still, no concentrated campaign against radar. Back in England, the control rooms are running around the clock. WAF plotters nap in shifts beside their maps. Radar crews survive on tea and biscuits, eyes locked to screens. RAF Group Commanders Park and No. 11 Group, Lee Mallory and No. 12, continue making split-second decisions with information only radar can provide. It's working. For every 10 bombers the Luftwaffe sends, one doesn't make it back. RAF fighters bleed too, but their losses are replaced quickly, and their pilots rotate home more often. Morale remains high. The British public listens to BBC bulletins reporting increased air activity over Kent or successes against raiding forces, but few civilians know how close the country is to disaster or how narrowly they've avoided it. Behind it all, Chain Home quietly holds the line. On July 25th, Göring personally visits Pas-de-Calais to inspect Luftwaffe 2's preparations. Pilots complain that the RAF seems to anticipate them too well. They know, one says. Every time we're over the channel, they're already climbing to meet us. Göring snorts. Nonsense. They are guessing, blind cats swiping at the dark. He orders an increase in bomber formations. No change to the radar strategy. No dedicated effort to wipe out the towers. Even now, he believes British resistance is temporary. That Churchill will soon come to the table. That fear will break the island. But fear is no match for what the British have built. Not steel. Not firepower. Information. And every mile the German bombers fly deeper into England. That information grows sharper, faster, and more deadly. By the end of July, it's no longer a one-sided fight. It's a chess match, and radar is letting the British see the board. The 1st of August 1940, Adolf Hitler signs Directive No. 17. The wording is direct. The Luftwaffe is to overpower the English Air Force with all forces at its command, in preparation for a cross-channel invasion. Operation Sea Lion now depends on total control of the skies. The Reich believes that if the RAF is crushed, Britain will have no choice but to negotiate. The campaign is officially named Adlerangriff, Eagle Attack. Its objective: destroy the RAF's fighters, airfields, production centers, and if convenient, radar. In London, British intelligence intercepts German orders. Dowding already knows what's coming, but unlike his enemy, he doesn't place his faith in raw force. He trusts timing, positioning, and precision. That means Chainhome becomes even more critical. By early August, every radar station is operating at full capacity. The operators, many in their teens or early 20s, work long shifts, heads bent over green-lit screens, hands guiding slide rules, voices calm under pressure. They track wave after wave of German formations before the bombers even reach the coast. Every spike in the signal is logged, every echo traced. From Baudsee to Pevensey, the network is alive listening. August 8th, the first heavy strikes of Adlerangriff hit the convoys along the English Channel. Fighter Command knows they're coming. Chainhome catches the formations climbing out of France. At 9:45, raids are detected near Cherbourg. At 10:10, they're plotted crossing the Channel. By 10:20, Spitfires from RAF Tangmere are in the air. The intercept is textbook. From the beach towns of Folkestone to the cliff tops of Beachy Head, civilians pause as the sky becomes a thunderous swarm. Trails of vapor twist above them. Gunfire rattles through the clouds. German bombers begin falling into the sea before reaching their targets. One Junkers 88 breaks formation after taking engine fire. It turns back but doesn't make it. RAF pilots from No. 64 Squadron pursue it across the Channel and finish the job 10 miles from the French coast. British losses are heavy but controlled. They're choosing the battles, picking their moments. The reason is radar. Fighter Command can't afford to patrol endlessly. It doesn't have the numbers. Dowding knows this better than anyone. Every aircraft matters. Every gallon of fuel matters. Radar tells them when to scramble, when to hold, and where to engage. It's a war of conservation, of calculated risk. And it's working. The Luftwaffe still doesn't understand why their raids are being intercepted so efficiently. They believe RAF Command is tapping into coastal observers or listening in on German radio frequencies. Some even suspect high-level espionage, but almost no one at OKL, the Luftwaffe High Command, grasp how deeply radar is shaping the fight. Even when reports of radar towers start piling up, Göring refuses to prioritize them. "We're not in the business of chasing shadows," he says. But they're not shadows. They're the backbone. On August 12th, the Luftwaffe launches Operation Adler Tag Eagle Day. Over 1,500 sorties. Bombers, fighters, dive bombers, everything the Luftwaffe can throw. Targets include coastal airfields, radar sites, and communication hubs. One of the few Chainhome stations seriously hit is Ventnor, on the Isle of Wight. Bombs knock out its main transmitter. For the first time, part of the net goes dark. Fighter Command has a blind spot, and the Luftwaffe strikes harder in that gap. But Dowding and his engineers expected this. Ventnor's crews fall back to emergency generators and backup receivers. Within 36 hours, partial service is restored. By the end of the week, Ventnor is scanning again. No other radar stations are knocked out. Not one. The system proves rugged, resilient. The bombers fly blind. Britain does not. Each German raid is now a race against the British response time, against the speed of interception, and against an invisible net watching from over the sea. The RAF doesn't win every battle, but it denies the Luftwaffe what it needs most: dominance. And as Göring's campaign drags into its third week, one bitter truth starts to take hold even among the most loyal staff officers. The British know we're coming. Every time. The 15th of August, 1940. Göring gives the order. He believes Fighter Command is nearly beaten. Reports from the front suggest British squadrons are stretched thin. Some German commanders claim they're seeing fewer Spitfires. Others believe the British are deliberately avoiding direct engagements. Morale in Berlin is high. It's time to crush what's left. So Göring launches the largest single-day aerial assault of the war, so far more than 1,700 sorties across southern, eastern, and even northern England. Luftwaffe 2 hits London's approaches. Luftwaffe 3 targets the Midlands. And Luftwaffe 5, flying from Norway and Denmark, attacks the northeast expecting light resistance. It's a critical mistake. The Germans still don't understand the scale or coverage of Chainhome. They think radar is only operational in the southeast. They don't know that Britain has extended the network hundreds of miles along the coasts of Yorkshire and Northumberland. So when Luftwaffe 5 approaches from Scandinavia, they believe they're coming in undetected. But at RAF Staxton Wold near Scarborough, Britain's oldest radar site, the operators are already watching. By 9 a.m., the radar team detects large formations inbound from the North Sea. Within minutes, the information is relayed to Fighter Command Headquarters, then to No. 13 Group, responsible for northern defense. Unlike previous weeks, today the Germans are heading into territory with fresh squadrons. Pilots in No. 13 Group haven't been exhausted by daily combat like their counterparts in No. 11. They're rested, eager. When the German bombers cross the coast near Newcastle, Hurricanes from RAF Usworth and RAF Acklington are already climbing. The result is devastating. 34 German bombers and fighters are lost in the north alone. Some go down over land, others spiral into the sea. Luftwaffe 5, shocked by the strength of the British defense, retreats in chaos. They never return in force. At the same time, in the south, British radar picks up multiple large raids building across the French coast. Chain home stations from Pevensey to Fournes track dozens of aircraft groups fanning out across the Channel. Some aim for the Thames. Others push toward Portsmouth. One force arcs toward the inland airfields of Biggin Hill and Hornchurch. Inside RAF Uxbridge's command room, every phone is lit. WAAF plotters move faster than ever, dragging wooden markers across the plotting table. Group commanders bark orders. Intercepts are launched from Duxford, Tangmere, Kenley, and North Weald. Dowding watches it unfold with a familiar expression, calm, calculating. The Luftwaffe's plan was simple. Attack from multiple directions at once, overwhelm the radar net, and strike RAF bases from the north and south. But radar isn't just one station, it's a chain. Each post covers a slice of sky, and together they form a seamless web. Even if one station is busy or blinded by jamming, others fill in. So the British fighters rise again, and again, and again. By sunset, the Luftwaffe has lost nearly 80 aircraft, more than twice what Fighter Command loses that day. And unlike the RAF, Germany can't replace its trained crews fast enough. Back in Berlin, Göring is furious. He demands answers. How did they know we were coming from Norway? How were they ready in the north? His intelligence officers shrug. Maybe spies. Maybe lucky guesses. No one suggests radar. Not seriously. The next day the raids continue, but something has changed. Luftwaffe bomber crews are jittery. Escort fighters are more cautious. Confidence is slipping. The myth of British weakness has cracked. Meanwhile, the British press publishes an understated headline. Enemy attacks repelled across coast. RAF in control. Most civilians don't know about Chain Home. They've never seen the towers up close. They don't know how many times it has bought them precious minutes to get underground, or how many pilots it has guided to the right sky at the right time. But in the air, the message is clear. Britain is not surprised. Britain is never unprepared. Every time a Heinkel crosses the Channel, someone is already watching. And every time a Spitfire appears out of the clouds like a ghost too fast, too accurate, it's not luck. It's the echo of radar, bouncing silently across the sea. And on August 15th, the Luftwaffe learns that lesson the hard way. The 18th of August, 1940. Dawn breaks cold and quiet over southern England. But every man in Fighter Command knows it won't stay that way. By 11 a.m., chain home stations begin reporting multiple formations leaving the French coast, Pevensey, Rye, and Dover. All light up within minutes. The screens show heavy activity more than just probing attacks. This isn't routine. This is a full assault. In the underground bunker at RAF Uxbridge, Sector Controller Group Captain Victor Beamish scans the map as red markers flood the table. Calls pour in. Controllers shout vectors. Dowding arrives just before the first wave hits. Calm as ever, he simply says, "Get them up." By noon, 11 group squadrons are already in the air. Spitfires from Hornchurch and Hurricanes from Kenley and Biggin Hill climb through broken cloud. They're not flying blind. They're flying with purpose, directed by radar every step of the way. The target is clear. RAF airfields: Biggin Hill, Kenley, Debden, Croydon. Today, the Luftwaffe is aiming straight at the RAF's ability to stay in the fight. At 12:30 p.m., Ju-87 Stuka dive bombers scream down on Kenley. The sound is unforgettable, like metal tearing through the sky. Bombs punch through hangars, crater runways, and set fuel stores ablaze. It's the most concentrated attack yet, but the cost is steep. British radar spotted them 20 minutes before they crossed the coast. And in that time, fighters were scrambled, civilians were warned, and ground crews were evacuated. The RAF suffers losses, planes destroyed on the ground, airmen killed. But the base isn't knocked out. It stays operational, because they knew it was coming. By 2 p.m., a second wave forms over Calais. Chain home stations at Dover and Dunkirk both report echoes at over 20,000 feet. Two more raids behind it, staggered, layered. Squadron leader Peter Townsend of No. 85 Squadron later recalls, "There were times I didn't know who I was firing at until I saw the cross or the roundel. It was just sky, smoke, and chaos. Dozens of aircraft are lost on both sides. But the Germans take the heavier blow, especially the Stuka units. Ju-87 seconds were effective in Poland and France, where they could dive uncontested. Here, they're being torn apart before they can even begin their dive. Slow, unarmored, and flying in predictable patterns, they're easy targets for Spitfires climbing with a radar-guided lead. By the end of the day, nearly 70 Luftwaffe aircraft are downed. Many of the pilots are killed or captured. Among the German bomber groups, morale is collapsing. Some crews begin aborting missions early. The British lose 30 fighters, many of them on the ground, but replacements are already en route. Mechanics work through the night. Runways are patched. Planes are rolled from hidden dispersal pens. And the radar towers? Still standing, still watching. August 18th becomes known as the hardest day. It's the single most intense day of the entire battle. But despite all of Göring's efforts, despite the thousands of pounds of bombs dropped, the dozens of raids launched, Fighter Command still stands. Dowding knows what this means. Radar has done its job again. It didn't stop the bombers. That's not what it's meant to do. It gave Britain the one thing every defender needs: time. Time to launch. Time to position. Time to fight back. Without it, those airfields might have been wiped out. Without it, the RAF might have been caught flat-footed. Without it, the channel might already be filling with German barges. Instead, the radar net holds, Fighter Command holds. And Hitler, watching from Berghof, begins to wonder if air superiority will ever come. The 24th of August 1940. The sun hangs low over southern England, casting long shadows across fields now scarred with craters and wreckage. At RAF Hornchurch, airmen sleep next to their aircraft. Mechanics sleep under them. The smell of fuel clings to the grass. There's no real rest anymore, just short breathers between raids. But inside Britain's radar stations, there's no pause at all. Chainhome keeps humming, watching, measuring. At 4:18 p.m., a familiar pattern appears on the oscilloscope at the Rye radar station. Multiple returns, large formation, high altitude, coming from the Pas-de-Calais area. Operators call it in immediately. No drama, just procedure. Within seconds, the message is relayed up the chain. At RAF Uxbridge, the map table lights up again. Markers slide into place. WAF plotters don't hesitate, they've done this hundreds of times now. A formation of over 80 aircraft is inbound. No. 11 Group knows exactly what to do. By 4:26 p.m., squadrons are scrambled from Biggin Hill and North Weald. No circling, no patrolling. They climb directly into the enemy's projected path, based entirely on radar reports and radio vectors. As they crest 20,000 feet, the German bombers break through the clouds. It's all working exactly as designed. Over the past month, Fighter Command has refined its process. Intercepts are faster. Fighter groups are more disciplined. Ground controllers are sharper. What began as a miracle of invention has now become a machine of precision, and radar is its core. Chainhome doesn't just spot the enemy. It tells Fighter Command where to point its limited strength for maximum impact. Britain still doesn't have the numbers Germany does, but it doesn't need them. Not with this kind of visibility. That day, the German raid aims to cripple airfields again, but it's torn apart before reaching its primary targets. Bombers jettison payloads early. Escorts peel off under pressure. 14 aircraft are lost. The rest limp home, many trailing smoke over the channel. For the RAF, it's another step forward. But then, something shifts. That night, German bombers fly again. But this time, they're not aiming for runways or radar. They drop their payloads over London. It's not entirely intentional. One formation loses its way. Under heavy fire and poor visibility, it mistakes the capital for a military target. Incendiaries fall across civilian homes. Fires rage through the East End. Civilians, D. Churchill's response is immediate and fierce. The RAF is ordered to strike Berlin in retaliation. For the first time, British bombers cross deep into the German capital. The damage is light, but the message is loud. Hitler is enraged. Göring had promised the Reich that no British plane would ever reach Berlin. Now bombs are falling on the city. His reaction changes the course of the war. He orders a shift in strategy. London will now be the primary target. The goal: break British morale by hammering the heart of its population. But in doing so, Hitler makes a mistake, perhaps the biggest of the entire campaign. Because by turning his focus away from RAF airfields and control centers, he gives fighter command room to breathe, room to rebuild, retrain, and rearm. Airfields that were nearly crippled now get days, even weeks to repair. Chain-Home remains untouched, and with its radar net fully intact, the RAF continues to intercept bombers over and over before they reach London. On August 30, another major raid builds over the channel. Over 100 German aircraft. Radar tracks them early. Fighter squadrons from Tangmere and Kenley rise swiftly and hit the formation hard before it reaches the city. It's becoming routine, and that's the point. Göring still refuses to believe radar is making the difference. He clings to the idea that British command is simply lucky, or perhaps bluffing. But to the men and women of fighter command, it's no mystery. They've watched the dots on screens. They've drawn the arcs. They've listened to pilots confirm kills from coordinates radar predicted minutes earlier. They know why Britain is still standing. In the quiet moments between alarms, someone sometimes asks, what if they had bombed the towers first? No one answers, because they all know what would have happened if the radar had fallen. The 7th of September 1940. 5 p.m. Sirens wail across London. In the sky, more than 300 German bombers escorted by swarms of Bf 109 seconds descend on the East End like a wave of black steel. Workers flee factories. Mothers pull children into shelters. Firefighters brace for the first of what will become 57 consecutive nights of bombing. The Blitz has begun. At first glance, it looks like the Luftwaffe's momentum is returning. The bombs fall in clusters. Flames stretch across the docks. The Thames glows red under smoke. Whole blocks vanish overnight. Göring believes this is the final blow. He tells his staff, "We'll wipe London off the map. They'll crawl to us." But as fires burn in the capital, something quietly shifts behind the front lines. Fighter command isn't scrambling to protect radar towers anymore. It isn't watching airfields being cratered day after day. The change in German targets means radar operations continue uninterrupted. That single fact turns every night of terror into an opportunity. On September 9th, as another wave crosses the channel, Chain-Home detects them 28 miles out well before they reach the coast. Ground controllers track their altitude and bearing. Squadrons are scrambled from RAF Hornchurch and Biggin Hill. They intercept the bombers before they even reach central London. It doesn't stop the Blitz, but it weakens the blow, and it saves thousands. By this point, the entire system is running like a reflex. Radar picks up the raid. Information is filtered through the filter room. Uxbridge maps it in real time. Orders are dispatched. Fighters are in the air before the enemy knows they've been spotted. Every attack becomes a test of timing, and Britain keeps passing it. On September 13th, a squadron of He 111 bombers attempts a low-level strike on industrial sites in Croydon. But Pevensey radar picks them up as they form up in France. RAF sector controllers adjust their response. Hurricanes from Kenley hit the Heinkels near Sevenoaks 12 miles before the target. The result? 7 bombers downed, the rest scattered. Croydon is spared. The pattern repeats over and over. Radar sees. Command decides. Fighters strike. By mid-September, British pilots aren't just defending, they're hunting. Using real-time guidance, Spitfires now target bomber formations at their most vulnerable. During climbs, during turns, or just after escort fighters have peeled away. Squadron leader Douglas Bader of No. 242 Squadron later described it this way: "We weren't guessing anymore. We knew where they were. We knew how fast. We knew where to hit. And radar told us first." In Berlin, the Luftwaffe command is confused. The attacks on London continue night after night. But the RAF isn't collapsing. Airfields are still launching fighters. Radar still seems to work. The pilots are still there, flying with purpose, fighting with energy. On September 15th, Göring launches a massive daylight raid over 600 aircraft. The goal is simple: crush London in one decisive blow. But the British radar net lights up the moment the first formations cross the French coast. Within minutes, squadrons from No. 11 and No. 12 groups are airborne, coordinated in layered intercepts. What follows is one of the most decisive air battles of the war. Fighter command intercepts and scatters the enemy before they can reach full bombing formation. Over 60 German aircraft are shot down in a single day. The RAF loses 26 fighters, but most of the pilots survive and return to duty. Winston Churchill watches from the Uxbridge command bunker, deep underground. As the reports roll in, he turns to his staff and says, "Never in the field of human conflict was so much owed by so many to so few." And the few, those RAF pilots, knew they were never truly alone in the sky. Radar was always with them, watching, guiding. After September 15th, something breaks in the Luftwaffe. The raids continue, but the belief that Britain will fall fades. Pilots begin flying higher and faster, jettisoning bombs early. Some turn back before even crossing the coast. Their confidence is gone. In contrast, British morale stiffens. The public doesn't know the full story yet. The radar towers are still a mystery to most, but they see the Spitfires overhead. They hear the bombs dropping farther from city centers. They feel that, somehow, the tide is turning, and behind the curtain, Chainholm never sleeps. Every echo, every faint return on a glowing green screen is another warning, another chance, another life saved. Britain isn't just fighting back. It's winning because it can see in the dark. Late September 1940. The Luftwaffe is still coming, but not like before. Fewer bombers, fewer fighters, less coordination. The skies over Britain are no longer swarming. The once confident German raids now feel cautious, probing. Reconnaissance flights increase. Bombing becomes erratic. Inside Fighter Command, Air Chief Marshal Hugh Dowding notices the shift. But he's not relaxing. He knows Göring is not done. Not yet. Then, a strange thing happens. October 1st. A large formation of Ju-88 bombers flies directly over the Chainholm station at Poling, one of the original radar sites. They're low, unescorted, vulnerable, and they drop bombs. But they don't target the radar towers. They target a nearby village. The station remains untouched. Back in Berlin, Luftwaffe planners are still operating under the belief that radar isn't decisive. They've seen the towers. They've heard the intelligence. But they continue to assume it's traditional radio spotting, primitive, unreliable. They believe Britain's success is due to aggressive pilots or lucky guesses, maybe even intercepted communications. The truth is staring them in the face. They just won't see it. Meanwhile, the British are seeing everything. Chainholm isn't just spotting incoming raids anymore, it's now being fine-tuned to predict intentions. Operators have grown so familiar with radar patterns that they can tell the difference between a real bombing run and a feint. Controllers at Uxbridge, Bentley Priory, and Stanmore now guide squadrons not just to intercept, but to outmaneuver. German formations come in, and they're already flanked. Bomber groups begin a turn, and find Spitfires waiting. The Bf 109 seconds try to lure the British into a trap and get ambushed instead. It's not luck, it's real-time coordination, and it starts with radar. On October 12, Luftwaffe Command launches what will be one of its final large daylight raids. Their goal is to hit RAF bases north of London and to test whether the RAF is still functioning as a cohesive force. Chainholm spots them at 10:22 a.m., climbing to 21,000 feet over Cap Grisnez. Fighter Command responds instantly. No. 11 Group launches squadrons from Biggin Hill and North Weald. No. 12 Group provides top cover, sweeping wide to the east. By the time the German bombers reach British airspace, they are flying straight into a layered ambush. Dozens of RAF fighters descend from multiple altitudes timed perfectly. 15 bombers are downed in the first 5 minutes. The rest scatter. Some never drop their bombs. It's a rout, and it's the last major daylight raid of the Battle of Britain. Within days, Göring orders all remaining large-scale operations move to night only. He spins it as strategy, a way to cripple morale under the cover of darkness. But everyone inside the Luftwaffe knows the truth. They've lost the day. The skies over England no longer belong to the Reich. At Chainholm stations, operators quietly log each fading return, each German formation that turns back, each bomber that fails to appear. There's no celebration, just the steady pulse of discipline. They know this isn't over. Night raids still come. The blitz continues. Cities burn. But Fighter Command is intact. Radar is intact. And for the first time in months, Britain's survival is no longer in doubt. In the days that follow, Churchill walks among the ruins of London. He visits fire brigades, speaks with bombed-out families. His face is lined with exhaustion, but there's steel in his voice. He says, "We have stood alone, but we are not afraid." The enemy made a grave mistake. He underestimates the quiet, patient watchfulness of this island. What the Luftwaffe couldn't see, what they refused to see, was that Britain's real strength wasn't just in its fighters or its will. It was in the system. Invisible. Unshakable. A chain of eyes stretching from Dover to Dundee. Listening. Calculating. Responding. That chain never broke. And now, the enemy begins to realize they've been fighting blind all along. The 31st of October 1940. Rain cuts across the airfield at RAF Biggin Hill. A lone Spitfire taxis across the wet tarmac, its paint scarred from weeks of fighting. Ground crews, soaked to the bone, wave it into a dispersal bay. Another sortie complete. Another pilot returns. The Battle of Britain is over. The official end date won't mean much to the men and women who lived it. Bombs will still fall. Cities will still burn. But the Luftwaffe has stopped trying to win the skies by day. Hitler quietly shelves Operation Sea Lion. The invasion of Britain is indefinitely postponed. Not because the RAF had more planes, not because the British shot down more bombers, but because the Germans never understood what they were really fighting, while the Luftwaffe threw thousands of tons of bombs at runways and rail yards. The true nerve center of Britain's defense stood quietly behind the lines, unshaken, barely touched. Chainholm, the radar net that watched the skies from the first day of July to the final hours of October. The system Hitler mocked. The towers Göring refused to prioritize. They were the backbone, the edge. They gave Fighter Command something Germany never had: early warning and precision response. Even when outnumbered, even when stretched thin, the RAF could be in the air, on time, in the right place, not guessing, not reacting. Fighting with intelligence, guided by signals no German commander believed were real. And that edge changed everything. From the first wave on July 10th to the final daylight attack in October, radar shifted the odds. It allowed a smaller force to defend a wide coastline with maximum efficiency. It gave commanders like Keith Park the tools to make every fighter count. It gave Dowding the power to fight a smarter war, not just a harder one. Most importantly, it denied the enemy control. Göring had promised Hitler that the RAF would be wiped out in 4 weeks. He failed. And he failed because the enemy he faced wasn't just squadrons of brave young pilots. It was a system of ground observers, WAAF plotters, engineers, mathematicians, and a string of cold steel towers pulsing radio waves across the sea. The Germans never truly grasped the scale of what they were up against. In the weeks after the battle, British analysts studied the wreckage of downed German aircraft. They found no maps of radar towers, no detailed targeting plans, just photographs of airfields and factories. That blind spot, born from arrogance, spared the radar net from sustained attack. Even when a few stations were hit like Ventnor and Pevensey, the damage was temporary. Crews rebuilt quickly, backups kicked in. Communications never went silent, and the dots on the radar screen kept coming. So the fighters kept flying, and Britain never fell. Years later, when Allied forces stormed the beaches of Normandy and bombers darkened the skies over Germany, historians would point back to the summer of 1940 as the turning point. Not just because the invasion of Britain was stopped, but because it proved something deeper. Technology and coordination could defeat brute force. Innovation could beat overwhelming numbers. Preparedness, not just courage, could decide a nation's fate. In the archives of the Air Ministry, there is a photo. It shows a young woman headset on, eyes locked to a glowing radar screen, pencil in hand. She's not wearing medals, no fame, but she is part of the chain. That chain, quiet, invisible, unshakable, held the line. As Churchill said of the pilots, "Never have so many owed so much to so few." But behind the few stood the ones who watched, who listened, who gave them time to climb. Radar didn't just help win the Battle of Britain. It made it possible.